today.
Good morning. It's a great day to be out of school and on a field trip, isn't it? Yes. We welcome you. The Newburgh Museum welcomes all 125 of you. And we also want to congratulate you because this is the largest group tour we have ever had at the Newburgh Museum. So thank you and welcome. Before we start, we're going to talk a little bit, maybe 10 minutes or so, about this area that we call Newburgh before there was a Newburgh. In fact, before there was even an Indiana. There was, however, a United States of America, and just like you and me, our country started out very small and grew some more and grew some more. It started out with just 13 states, and you probably know how many states we have now. 50. So it went from 13 to 50 in a relatively short time. Well, this place we're standing on right now, this parking lot, was part of a vast territory called the Northwest Territory that would later become Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and even part of Minnesota. That is a huge territory, and I have a map to show you how large. This, you probably recognize, is our country, the United States of America. Of course, Hawaii is out here in the ocean, and Alaska is up off of Canada. But this is the continental United States of America. Do you see the part I outlined? That was called the Northwest Territory, and where we're standing right now was part of it before there was a Newburgh or an Indiana. Eventually, 5 states, as I mentioned, came from this Northwest Territory. Now, this territory needed laws, and a Northwest Ordinance was passed in 1787, and those laws were very good. They were better than the original laws that governed the first colonies. 3 important laws I'll mention this morning that made this Northwest Territory so good and why people wanted to come here. First, no slavery was allowed in the Northwest Territory. Secondly, every township had to provide a school with free public education for children. And 3, all the land you purchased had to be scientifically surveyed and recorded at the courthouse. Now you might say, well, what's scientifically measured and what does that mean, surveyed? Well, I'll give you an example. In Kentucky and many other states at that time, if you bought a farm or a piece of property and you had boundaries, like let's say that big tree over there was part of the boundary, maybe a creek over there was another part of that boundary, and a big rock or boulder up there was the other part of the property. And as you know, recently we've had some heavy storms, haven't we? And what happens to trees sometimes when we have heavy storms? Yes, sir. They fall. And so if your big tree over here that was the southeast corner of your property fell, your neighbor could say, hey, that's part of my property. There's no tree there. There's no tree. I don't see any tree. That's part of my property. And it caused problems, fights, land disputes. And so this new scientific way of surveying land and recording it was really important back 225 years ago. Now, these three laws that I just mentioned, no slavery, the free public education, and the scientific surveying of land and recording it, made it very enticing. People wanted to come here, and they did. Our first settler, as you probably know, was Mr. John Sprinkle, and he came by the fastest, most safest way to travel in those days, down the Ohio River. There were no roads, and there was no railroad. He came by boat, on a flatboat, and a flatboat is, just like it sounds, flat on the bottom, with a little bitty, usually a little bitty house on top, no bigger than maybe a yard barn that you see in your backyard or whatever. And on the little flatboat, they would bring their cow and their milking cow and their chickens and maybe a pig or a goat. And in the little house, they would have barrels of food and seeds to plant and maybe a plow and some other useful implements. And Mr. Sprinkle came with his wife and his children down the river 1803 and settled here. And soon afterwards, others had the same idea. And a little town grew up called Sprinklesburg, later to become Newburgh. He was a blacksmith by trade, which was very important in those days. Blacksmiths made very important tools, mother's kettle for cooking, nails, all kinds of important things. Soon others came after Mr. Sprinkle, and Newburgh grew and became one of the most important towns or ports on the Ohio River. And one of the reasons it became so important is this little steamboat here, steamship. This is a model of the Robert E. Lee, and this model was actually made by a man who grew up in Newburgh and went to school here, just like you. In fact, he attended the school across the same school you attend, but it was called, and it was Newburgh Elementary, but it was a different building back then. He made this when he was in high school. It's pretty nice, isn't it? Well, the steamboat was important because it was fast and it was big, and you could bring many people and many things to sell on it. And so steamships started coming from Pittsburgh down the Ohio River, and they would stop here at Newburgh and let people off to live and bring on things that people wanted to sell down the river. And Newburgh became one of the most important and busy ports on all the Ohio River back, about 150 years ago. So we're going to divide up and talk about some of these early people that came to Newburgh and succeeded. Some of the houses that they built are along this street, State Street, and we're going to go down and talk about them, the people who built them, and some interesting features about the homes. Dr. Jim Rennie is over here, and he's going to be talking quite a bit about the architecture and point things about the buildings that are very interesting.
Keep your eyeballs open and look and see if you can tell what's different about an old building and ones that we build these days.
You know, if Mr. Sprinkle came in 1803, it's 2024 now.
Looks like Mr. Allen, but
That would have been 200.
Yeah, I know. My mom said she was coming
21 years ago. I'm just going to show you a little door in the side of that house, and there was a reason for it. It's not a window. It was a door that had a real purpose. Do you see the little window, or the little door? That was where the milkman came every morning, like at 4 in the morning when it was still dark out, and opened it up and put a couple of quarts of milk in there, glass jars of milk. And Mother, when she got up, she would open, there was on her side, on the inside, was another little door, and she would open it and get the milk out.
Well,
Now, the milkman had to come every day.
why?
Why do you
Why?
think the milkman had to come every day?
Because they were
Wait,
gonna
I would love a hand. Eli, what do you think?
to keep the to have cold milk
Yes.
But why doesn't the milk, your milk at home is cold, why doesn't the milkman
because
come
it's
every
in
day?
a refrigerator.
Okay, so what did they not have?
A refrigerator.
Right. They didn't have refrigerators to keep the milk from turning sour. And so the milkman made a daily delivery, if you wanted him to. Usually you put a little sign out that said yes, or I want 2 quarts, or I want 1 quart, or whatever, cottage cheese today, or sour cream today. And they would deliver it every morning for you if you asked for it. Okay. Now we're going to go up to these middle of this house here.
And Miss Rosemary's going to tell you the answer to this question, but looking at this house, there's something strange about the front doors. So keep your eyes peeled, and then she'll tell you about it, but see if you can notice what's different about the front of this house with respect to doors.
Okay, thank you.
Come this way.
This home was built and initially lived in by Dr. Mary Phelps. And Dr. Mary Phelps had an interesting life. She was born in New York City. And she and her brother and mother and father decided that New York was too crowded. They wanted to go west. And so they caught one of those big steamboats we showed you and talked about, caught that in Pittsburgh and came down the Ohio River. And the boat stopped here in Newburgh just to get coal and wood for their engine to keep going. Unfortunately, Mary's father died that night. He probably had a heart attack, we don't know. And so Mary's mother stayed here for a while and had both of her children with her, but then she passed away. And that left Mary and her brother without anyone, no family at all here. Well, a very kind family out by Yankeetown adopted her brother, and the Phelps family, the leading family of Newburgh, adopted Mary. And they raised her and wanted her to be a musician. She was very talented. They even sent her to a big musical consistory school in Ohio, Cincinnati. And she came back and said, I really don't want to teach. I love music, but I don't want to be a music teacher. I want to be a doctor, a medical doctor. So the Phelps family sent her to Northwestern University in Chicago, and she did become a doctor. And she came back here to practice her profession. Only problem was she didn't have any customers. No local people in Newburgh would come see her. They didn't trust a woman doctor who was only 4 foot 10 inches tall. She was probably the tallest person in your class, was as tall as Dr. Mary Phelps. But she didn't let that bother her. She packed up her bags and went out west by train to Cannon City, Colorado, and worked there for 20 years as a medical doctor for prisoners in a prison out there. And they would pay her in gold dust and nuggets and all kinds of interesting things that she brought back with her. She did come back here eventually, about 1900, and by then things had changed, and she was respected and honored and trusted as a doctor. And she kept her office here in her house. And so that might explain why there were other doors here.
Looks like there's 3 front doors.
Yes. Now, I'm not sure what all 3, I know the front, the red door would of course been for visitors to the house, her company and so on, just like you have a front door. But her office door to her medical office, to her doctor's office, would have been one of these 2. She might have had one for men and one for women, as far as I know. I don't know in those days. But there was also an infirmary here for Presbyterian ministers, and she helped start that infirmary. because her father, the Phelps family, they were strong Presbyterians, and they actually donated the land to build this church right next door, this Presbyterian church, and that's going to be our next stop.
And notice here's another example of a fancy window. See that curvy arch window and then the pretty glass behind it? There's another example of paying attention to just pretty little details.
Mm-hmm. Boys and girls, this house is a beautiful old house, and it was built by Mr. Abraham Phelps, who came out here from Vermont. And he was very prosperous, he did well, and he was also a very charitable man, as we know. He helped raise Mary, an orphan, and he helped donate the land next door to build the church. So he wasn't just, he was wealthy and successful, but he was also known as a very charitable person. This home has been here a long time, and it will be here a long time because the walls are about 1.5 feet thick. And it's very sturdily built. The back of it, we can't see the back from here, but on both the top floor and the bottom floor, all the way across the back, is a beautiful, like 12, 15 foot deep porch. And one thing you'll notice about houses in this era, almost everyone had a porch because there was no air conditioning, as you know, and so you spent time on the porch a lot. So just about every house had a porch if they could. The windows in this house are really big, aren't they? From top to bottom. If you were inside there, the window would go all the way down to your feet and up. There's a beautiful, and the ironwork along the top there, and this iron fence in front of you, those came from New Orleans, and they're original, and they're very well kept all these years. This family was also very musical. All this whole block. They would sit out on Sundays and play their instruments, and people would sing along. And
yeah, the musicians would be up on the porch up there, like on a stage, and then a lot of the people that came to listen would sit on these stone walls across the way. So this was just kind of like a little theater.
The church. This was built as a Presbyterian church, and you can kind of tell that, can't you? If you look up, you can see what used to be the steeple area. It has a bell there now, and that bell was so important. It not only let you know when church was starting, it also rang if big boats were coming, or if the militia, the local army needed to get together, if there was any danger. You know, like nowadays we have those sirens that go off if there's going to be a tornado. Well, the bell here worked in the same capacity for the same reason. It warned people of good things and dangerous things, both. On the side of this building, the church was actually upstairs, and downstairs was a school called the Delaney Academy, and it trained boys and girls to be ministers, to be religious ministers. And when you get past it, if you look up, you'll see that has kind of a stained glass window upstairs.
More fancy windows.
Yeah. Across the street, this building at one time was what? Can you read that? A bakery. Now, if you've got eagle eyes, like I know all of you do, if you look at the word right above bakery, right above it, it says N-E-W-B-U-R-G. Newburgh Bakery. But do you notice it's misspelled? There's no H on the end of it. Well, in truth, it really wasn't misspelled. There were two ways to spell Newburgh, and both ways were okay until about 100 years ago. And about 100 years ago, the U.S. Post Office said, nope, there's only going to be one way to spell Newburgh, because it didn't want to confuse this Newburgh with other Newburghs. And so it officially spelled the town's name with an H at the end, N-E-W-B-U-R-G-H. But it was both ways until then. And another interesting thing, Burg is a German word. Burg means little town. And new, of course, means the opposite of old. So they named, first it was Sprinklesburg, of course, when Mr. Sprinkle was here, but then it changed into Newburgh, a new little town. That was kind of a good name, wasn't it? Very good. We're going to cross the street and go past this building. There's a parking lot area, and we'll stand there.
Boys on the bench, let's go.
But on the top floor, above it, it looks like there's windows like apartments. And back then, what would be very common would be a person would have, let's say the baker, he would have the bakery downstairs and he would live upstairs. And so when he woke up in the morning to go to work, he'd have a breakfast and then just walk downstairs and he'd be at his place of work. So he wouldn't need a car or anything, just a quick commute. And that's very common. This business over here, same thing. You'd have the commercial part below and then the place where the merchants would live up above. Same thing would be true on this building here and probably the one on the corner. So that was pretty convenient. It has many advantages. It would have some disadvantages because you can never get away from your work. But that was a very common design back then.
When you were walking by the windows there, did you happen to look inside?
Yeah.
What does this store sell? Do you remember?
Like cups.
Sold furniture, I think, but it wasn't.
Cups and saucers.
Yeah, well, it did sell cups and things that are not so much new but old. And we call old furniture and old things sometimes antiques, don't we? And there are a lot of, at one time especially, this whole downtown area used to sell a lot of antiques. Another thing about this building, in the museum, did you see that old telephone that you stood in front of? Yeah, well, when those were operable back 100 years ago, you didn't have a dial or a push button on there to get your number. You had to turn that crank and put that receiver up to your ear and talk right into that mouthpiece, and you would get a lady that was in this building who was the operator, telephone operator. She would tell you, good morning, what number can I connect you to? And you would say, I want to talk to my grandma, and she's at number 123. And she would connect you to your grandmother. And so that's how telephones were, the old-time telephones were. Each town had its own telephone exchange. And then later, of course, Big Bell Telephone and General Telephone came along. But originally, they were individual telephone exchanges in the towns. Okay, we ready to move?
Yeah.
All righty. I heard a joke once the other day. Somebody said, if you're over 75, you don't want to walk into an antique store. They'll put a sign on you and sell you. You're an antique.
I think we're probably going to keep just going down to the river. That was our format last time.
Okay, this is a busy area there, so we want to really slow down, stay together.
Look at the little door. You can keep going, but just make sure you notice that the size of that little door. See it? Everybody see the little door?
Notice the wooden door as you go by it. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Think about what that might have been used for.
Okay, see this little door here? Just notice it. Okay. All right.
Downtown Evansville, there's a store that said Trump Heights. New Jersey?
Wow.
These people live so far away.
Wow.
Jersey Devils. That's a faster MLB, the New Jersey Devils.
It's getting warm, isn't it?
Tennessee? It's not even getting warm.
You're fine. I wore a sweater. I was cold this morning, but I am hot. Okay.
Is this as far as we can go? Play sports and lightning. This is as far as we can
You know, we talked about how Mr. Sprinkle came on a flatboat, and he came down that super highway, the best and safest and fastest way to travel 200 years ago. Well, he came on a flatboat in that river, right there, that huge, beautiful river. What's the name of that river? That's right, the Ohio River. Now, and do you see all that woods on the other side of the river? Well, that's what this side of the river looked like when Mr. Sprinkle came. It was all one big woods.
So when Mr. Sprinkle came here, he could have made a house on that side of the river or this side of the river. And he picked this side. Why? Well, did we just walk down a hill? A pretty big hill? He picked the side of the river on a hill. And so he built his cabin, actually not far from this exact spot, because the Ohio River will sometimes flood. It'll go higher and lower depending on how much rain there is. And so that side over there doesn't have any houses. There's never going to be a city over there, because in the springtime, the river is so high that those trees, the bottoms of the trees, the trunks of the trees are underwater. So Mr. Sprinkle was pretty smart. He knew that the river is going to go up and down. I'm going to pick the high side.
He was very smart. All of those people were so intelligent, really. There was a name for this street, too.
Yes. Now, Mr. Sprinkle or some of his friends, they're starting this new town, and they've made this nice road here. This road's been here forever, but they had to pick a name for the road. So if you were going to pick a name for this road, let's say you're brand new, and there's nobody around, but you can name it anything you want. What would you name that road? Go ahead. Sprinkleburg, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, what they picked was Water Street. Now that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes, doesn't it?
I think I get it.
Yeah, I
get
do
it.
too. Yeah. And what was this Water Street like?
Oh, because this was a big river port, and so there would be sometimes dozens of boats tied up here, taking all kinds of stuff up and down the river. And so right here where we're standing, there was a big warehouse. So if a farmer would bring in a bunch of corn to sell, he would leave it here in the warehouse. This is where the army kept their weapons, which led to a little invasion. And so this was all stores and warehouses. There was a factory, all kinds of things along the riverfront.
Yeah, there were sawmills, because what did this side of the river have?
Woods.
Trees, wood. So there were sawmills, and there were butchers and bakers and candlestick makers and all kinds of businesses along here, as well as the warehouses. The streets were not paved, they were dirt, which meant in the summertime, if it didn't rain, they were so dusty. Oh, goodness. And in the fall and the winter and the spring, when the rains came, it was 6 inches or a foot of mud to have to go through. And they would even put planks of board wood to get across the street, so you didn't get just totally sunk in 6 inches of mud. And it was a very interesting place, busy place, smelly place, because those ships, those boats might have pigs and horses and oxen and chickens in them, and they would be wandering all around.
But sometimes it was pretty cool, because they had boats going up and down the river for special reasons. Like they would have a showboat.
Yeah.
And this would be like a theater, like you guys go to showplace cinemas or something, but this is like a theater on a boat. And the first ones were just a theater on a boat, and something else had to push it because they didn't have engines in them. And then you'd maybe the bell would ring, hey, the showboat's in town, and you'd go down, you'd pay your money, and you'd go see a show on the boat. That was pretty cool.
It was pretty cool.
And they had other kinds of businesses that would come up and down. I've seen pictures of a photographer boat.
Yeah.
And he'd come down and take pictures of your families, and the next day you'd go in and get the pictures that he developed overnight.
A photographer was a rare case. If you had your picture taken, you were fortunate. You probably had one picture of yourself from when you were a child. It was, you didn't have, like we do now with our phones, taking pictures all the time. You just had one picture, and usually you were very solemn when you had that picture taken because it was very important.
But this was the mall.
Yeah,
mall
this was
of
the
era.
mall, yes.
Yeah.
And what happened if you wanted to get across to the other side? Because some people farmed over there, and some people kept cattle over there, and there were no bridges. So there was something called a ferry boat, and there were ferry boat operators, and you came down here to the water's edge, and you rang a bell, and the ferry boat operator would take you, or he would ring the bell and say he's ready to go. You better get down here on the boat if you want to go. And he would take them across over to the Kentucky side and back. And back up the river, up the street where we were, we passed where that parking lot was. There used to be houses there run by and the Conway family owned them, and their pictures are in the museum, Mr. and Mrs. Conway. Mrs. Conway, Indianola Conway was her name. She was the first lady licensed ferry boat captain right here in Newburgh.
So there are no bridges.
No bridges, but there was a railroad. We're going to talk about that, Dr. Jim. On the other side of this restaurant is a grassy area, and we're going to walk over there. We're going to stay on this side of the street, and we're going to walk past the restaurant here. This building across the street has 3 capital letters on it, of course, and you recognize that as E, S, and N. And the E stood for Evansville, the S stood for suburban, and the N stood for Newburgh. So the Evansville, Suburban, and Newburgh train depot. This was a train depot, and the train came down tracks down the middle of the street from Evansville and went all the way to Rockport from here.
There were railroad tracks down the middle of Water
Yes,
Street?
Dr. Jim. They aren't here now. They're covered up, but they're...
And a train would go down Water Street?
A train would go down Water Street, and it brought not only people, but products like coal, for instance. And it was very popular, used for many years. In fact, I think up until about the 1930s, I think it finally stopped.
This is another example of fancy windows, isn't it? And that arch there is made of bricks. Now, bricks are usually like a rectangle, so how do you make a circle out of rectangular bricks? Well, these brick masons back then were very clever, and each one of those bricks that over the arch is a little bit of a wedge. And so if you add them all together, they make a half of a circle. And that's where the train station operator lived. So if you were the ticket agent, that's where he lived, right upstairs. Again, another example of where you live on top of where you work.
You know, in the museum, did you happen to see that one display back where the school was, where the school desks were, and there was that picture of that guy selling tickets? That was for this train station. This used to be a theater called the Princess Theater, and there were lights that came out and went around it. Silent movies were shown there. You didn't hear people talk in them. And so they had a piano player that helped set the mood. If it was a scary movie, the piano player would play scary music. If it was an adventure and they were trying to get away on their horses or something, they would play music that would be adventurous. And if it was romantic, they would play a romantic song. So the piano player was very important to the movie business. You didn't buy any popcorn or soda here. You could buy it when you left, but you couldn't buy it and take it in and eat. And the chairs, we have a couple of the chairs left from this theater. They were wooden, they weren't padded, they weren't very wide, so you weren't as comfortable as you are today. But it didn't matter because movies were a brand new thing. People were just so excited about them, they would come all the time. Movies were very important. Did Mr. Mark talk to you about somebody named Jack Wilson?
Yeah.
Well, did he tell you about he was lost in the war and they didn't know where he was? Did he mention about this theater?
No. I think so.
His friend saw a movie,
Yeah.
and that's how they knew he was okay.
A relative or something came into the movie and saw a little clip, like a little short movie before the real movie started, and it showed about this lost army unit, and it showed a picture of Mr. Wilson, and so the boy knew that he was alive, and he went home and told his parents right away. It was kind of exciting.
This building over here that we walked by started out as a hotel because there was so much river traffic that people needed a place to stay overnight. And so the man, who's a German from Germany, he started a hotel, but he wasn't sure how good his business was going to be. So he built the bottom part out of stone. You see that? The bottom part of that wall is stone. And they stopped there because he wasn't sure if he'd have enough business. And business did great, and so he added the next story out of brick. So that kind of shows how the building grew along with Newburgh. And then there's that small door that we looked at when we walked by. Any ideas about what that might be for? Yeah. 10 points for coal, yes, because this building would have been heated by coal. They didn't have other kind of furnaces, and so if you didn't have a small door like that, would you want to be bringing coal through your business? Yeah, it'd be heavy and dirty, so they would have this special little door that would go down into the coal bin. So that's kind of neat. And then as we walk along here, you know, we've been pointing out the different fancy things. This fancy ironwork here. Has anyone here been to Mesker Park Zoo?
Yes.
Mesker? Okay, well the Mesker company was in Evansville, and they made these kinds of fancy decorative things, and they were sold all over the country. It was big business. And in fact, that kind of turret on the end of the Exchange Hotel, that round thing, that looks like it's made out of stone, but that's really made out of metal, and it was made by Mesker. And so they made decorative items that they put. So as you walk by, you can see on that little plaque down there, it says Mesker. And that's the Mesker that gave us the zoo from business selling stuff like that.
They aren't exactly identical twins. They're slightly different. And there is a reason for that. When they were built in the 1880s, 145 years ago, they were twins exactly. But this house over here, the light blue house on the right, had a fire. You know, back in those days, without electricity, you used a candle or a kerosene lamp and to see, and those things were so dangerous. If you knocked it off with your elbow, your carpet and your curtains would go up in flame, and the next thing you know, your house would be on fire. So it was a very constant danger. And that house burned down. And then it was rebuilt, of course, but not exactly like it originally was. You can see the turret on the one side is taller than the other. It doesn't have a pointed top on it, and the porches are different. I like the porch over here on the light blue because it's so big it goes over on the other side of the house.
And that's another example of how old houses often had very nice porches because they didn't have air conditioning.
Mm-hmm. So the twin houses, we still call them the twin houses, and they're very, very similar. And I love the blue color. Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And somebody just bought the right-hand one, and they're going to live in it and keep it fixed up. And that's the reason these houses are still standing, because people live in them and they take care of them. And people have been taking care of this for, 140 years?
Yeah. This house was built by Mr. Pettmiller. He ran a flour mill and a brewery. And if you know anything about breweries, they brew beer. He was German. He had German beer and flour, and he called them the Eagle Brewery and the Eagle Flour Mill. And on the other side of this block, there's apartment buildings. But before the apartments were built, it was the old flour mill for Mr. Pettmiller. This house also was nicknamed the Sill House, S-I-L-L, because the window sills were 4 feet deep and you could sleep on them in the hot summer weather. You'd lift up your window, let the breeze come in off the river, and sleep in the windowsill. So it got the nickname the Windowsill House.
Or you could sleep on those nice porches. There's some more big porches. Wow.
And the yellow house was built by Mr. Weed, W-E-E-D. He ran a stagecoach that went between Newburgh and Evansville. His wife's first name was Polly, and before she ever married, her maiden name was Castle. So he was married to Polly Castle. And as you know, some of the schools here in the high school are named for the Castle family. This house has 2 front doors too, so we find that occasionally.
These stones are flat and on the walls. Normally stones are round. So somebody had to take a chisel and make these stones flat. And so this was a person with a chisel and a hammer, and you can see the markings in the stones of where the chisels actually went. So that was a lot of work, but these people were so skillful that they could build walls 150 years and they still are standing. So that they knew what they were doing. But you can put your fingers actually right in the places where the chisels made them flat.
I wonder how many of those you could do in a day. That would be a lot of work. It's a great big house and built by a blacksmith by the name of Garfield Stokes. It was one of the very first houses in Newburgh to have closets. Now, do you have a closet in your bedroom or in your house? Yes. But back in the day, people didn't have closets because they didn't need them. You had one hat and you had probably 3 outfits. Maybe a good one you wore for Sunday, maybe one you wore to school, and a third one that you wore for working. And believe me, children did a lot of chores in those days. You milked the cow, you helped make things, you babysat the children, your brothers and sisters. You were a busy person. So you just needed a peg. They would have a peg coming out of the wall, and you hung your hat and your clothes on the peg and put your shoes on the floor. And that's all you needed. You didn't need a closet. Until you gained a little wealth. Some of these people then became more wealthy, bought more clothes, and then they decided they needed closets.
So what do you see here? We see nothing. And the reason there's nothing here is because somebody didn't care. There was a house here, and it was quite a nice house. And what happened was the people that owned it moved away. Nobody moved into it. And so there's nobody living in the house. And so vines started growing up the side, and a window broke, and birds started going inside, and probably a raccoon or 2. And over the course of time, and then the roof started leaking, and water started getting into the house, and it started getting moldy, and the wood started rotting, and finally the building was in such bad shape that you couldn't fix it anymore, and so they had to tear it down. And so we lost a building that we should have been able to save. And so that's a sad story. This is what happens when people don't care. Across the way, over there, that house has recently been purchased, and they're putting they fixed the roof, and he's going to move into it when he gets it all fixed up. The nice thing is he's keeping lights on at night in the windows, and that warms my heart, because it shows that house is going to survive. This house here didn't make it. And so, which looks better? A nice house with people living in it, or an empty lot? Or no.
We're going to walk down to the sign here and talk about our last house, and then we'll be back to the museum. When do you think this house was built? 1854. Very good. The 1854. What I want to note about this house is the family that started it. They were drugstore people. They were pharmacists, apothecaries, but they also, their children started the very first power company, electric company here in town. Remember we talked about back there that you had a telephone operator that took care of your calls? Well, in the old days, there was a local company, not a big company like Centerpoint or Vectron, but a little locally owned company that gave you electricity. And you had to subscribe to it. You had to say, I want to belong to this electric company. And you would pay monthly dues, and they would give you electricity. The electricity came on about 6 in the morning, and it turned off about 10 o'clock at night. You didn't have it on all day. And so if you had to get up at midnight for some reason, you had to light a candle or something to be able to see to get around. So it was just the beginning of electricity in Newburgh. Now, we're going to have, oh, excuse me.
Does anybody see the fancy window?
Yeah.
Not as fancy as some, but they put a little decorative circle on it just to be special.
Yes. Do you see that? There's a house there. Do you see it in the corner? Do you see it, that two-story white house with the, yeah, that's an old house that was built by the Cook family, K-O-C-H, Peter Cook and his wife. We don't go there. It's off of our beaten path. We don't stop at that house. But they were German, and they ran a grocery. And Margarita was his wife's name, Peter and Margarita Cook, K-O-C-H. And they built that big house, and they were kind of, I like the way they situated that house because it's high up on a hill and you could see down the road and so on.
And this was a train station.
Yeah, this is another train station.
Yeah,
there were two traction lines.
Yeah, this one went to Boonville.
Yeah. It went up to Boonville because Boonville had mines, and workers from Evansville would come up to Boonville to work the mines and bring coal back and forth too. So as we walk up to the museum, you can kind of look over in this. There is a bell from the original school that's in the top of that school. Now, it's not lit, so you really have a hard time seeing it. But if you've got good eyes, you might. We always enjoy having the Evansville Christian School. You're very, very good students. Thank you. Come back and see us. The museum's free. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, you guys get to sit in the back of the bus. Nice. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Like I was
really...
so excited that I got to come today because I'm like,
yeah.
gosh, I just am so interested myself, and
You
I
do.
love for the kids to get to learn that it's like really special that we live here. It's like
Yes, it is.
It's not just home and we love it because it's home, but like we live in a pretty special town.
We used to end it with a song, and I used to, you know, like row, row your boat, you know, we love, love, love our town. Newburgh is so cool.
Yeah.
Merrily, 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 merrily. We live and go to school, you know, and we used to just play that.
Yeah.
And we'll have to do that next year. I'll have to remember to end it that way. Thank you.
I'm glad that
Thanks
you
so
do
much.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Right.